It's widely assumed that Tolkien would have hated Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies for cutting beloved scenes, altering characters, and filtering his epic through the lens of a Hollywood action movie. But looking at the guidelines Tolkien himself wrote for how to faithfully adapt The Lord of the Rings, it becomes clear that he wouldn't have merely approved of the movies, he likely would have loved them. But before making that case, we need to address a seemingly fatal contradiction. In his essay on fairy stories, Tolkien famously wrote that fantasy is a thing best left to words, to true literature. And at first glance, this sounds like a rejection of fantasy filmmaking, but Tolkien didn't say this as a philosophical point, but rather how Tony Stark's father said,
"I'm limited by the technology of my time."
Tolkien had practical frustration at how, quote, men dressed up as talking animals may achieve buffoonery or mimicry, but they do not achieve fantasy. Therefore, fantastic forms are not to be counterfeited. But over the past 70 years, movies have gotten a lot better at counterfeiting.
Oh, let's have another one. Oh, go on, do it again. Do it again. No.
Thanks to CGI and practical effects, Jackson's films create a fantasy world that feels real. And this immersion fulfills the first of Tolkien's 3 key functions of good fantasy: escape. Run! Comparing fantasy readers to prisoners, Tolkien asks, why should a man be scorned if, finding himself in prison, he tries to get out and go home?
I'm back.
But critics argue that the version of Middle-earth audiences escape into through Jackson's movies isn't really Tolkien's, calling it too violent, fast-paced, and focused upon spectacle. Even Tolkien's son, Christopher, accused the movies of eviscerating the books by turning them into action movies. But Tolkien foresaw this risk, predicting that any adaptation of The Lord of the Rings will become either silly and childish,
Precious! Ring!
or vulgar and violent. Making his own preference clear, Tolkien said he should welcome the idea of a motion picture with all the risk of vulgarization, finding it less painful than sillification. So in other words, even when the movies miss, they miss in the direction he preferred. But Tolkien insisted that fantasy isn't just about escaping our world, it's about recovering what's meaningful inside it. In our modern lives, values like bravery are often diluted through layers of cliché and irony. But characters like Sam Gamgee present courage stripped of these distracting layers. Tolkien called this effect recovery, because by watching a 4-foot gardener fight a demon spider, we recover the essence of courage that we can apply to our own mundane lives. But that clarity doesn't come from Sam alone, it comes from the structure around him. Rather than cramming every plotline into the movie, the filmmakers omitted entire chapters like Tom Bombadil in The Scouring of the Shire, so that arcs like Sam's could breathe and land with emotional weight. And Tolkien approved of this. He saw omission as not just acceptable, but necessary, even suggesting that a movie adaptation of The Lord of the Rings might need to cut the Battle of Helm's Deep altogether. But despite the importance of escape and recovery, they aren't what Tolkien described as the highest function of fantasy stories. The happy ending, a fleeting glimpse of joy beyond the walls of the world, poignant as grief. But book purists will be quick to point out that what causes the destruction of the ring is very different in the movie compared with the book. Instead of Gollum falling into Mount Doom after tripping like he does in the book, movie Gollum falls after a fight with Frodo over the ring. This and other meaningful changes are often cited by book fans as evidence that the films betray Tolkien's wishes. But the author himself gave his blessing for filmmakers to deviate from the books so long as the changes have practical or artistic object. Artistic object, such as...
We wanted to make it look much more like Frodo's trying to get the ring back. It's not about killing Gollum, it's not about destroying the ring, it's about him taking the ring back.
Really the mirror image of the beginning, which is 2 addicts slugging it out for the possession, and again it goes all back to the ring.
And whether you agree with this change or not, it was an artistically motivated decision. But Tolkien loving these movies doesn't mean he wouldn't have had notes. I'm sure he'd disagree with the warg fight, roll his eyes at Aragorn's fake-out death, and write a blistering letter about the army of the dead. But in totality, they provide exactly what he intended, a glimpse of joy beyond the walls of this world. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing for more.